It was an overcast Monday morning, but I sat on the porch sipping coffee. Wrapped in an old knit sweater, I watched the dry leaves swirl down the front yard of our quiet Georgetown home. The house, where Henry and I had shared 35 years, felt vast and empty without me. The phone rang suddenly, interrupting the silence. I glanced at the screen and recognized my son, Ethan. Ethan rarely called to chat. Usually he had a specific purpose, like offering suggestions to upgrade my life. "Good morning, Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice light and energetic. I didn't want him to think I was tired or weak. "Mom, are you up?" Ethan's voice had a familiar urgency to it. "I wanted to stop by this afternoon. There's something we need to talk about." "What's so important, son?" I asked, sensing an unpleasant conversation. "Just some money stuff. No big deal," he replied, but his tone contradicted his words. "I'll be there around 2." Ethan hung up before I could reply. I sighed, taking another sip of my cold coffee. At 65, I still see myself as a vibrant, alert woman, but my son, Ethan, who just turned 40, seems to have a different idea. Since Henry died 4 years ago, Ethan has started to look at me differently. At first, it was just little things. He spoke louder, more slowly, as if I had suddenly become slow or deaf. Then he began explaining the simplest things: how to use a banking app on my phone, how to check a bill, even how to set a timer on the microwave, things I had mastered for decades. I got up from the porch and went inside. I needed to clean up a little before Ethan arrived. Sometimes I felt like I had to keep things neat and tidy, just so he wouldn't have to worry about my condition. This house has always been my pride and joy. A 2-story house with 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a small backyard that I planted myself. Henry and I bought it when our children, Emma and Ethan, were 4 and 6 years old, respectively. Its walls held countless happy memories, but since Henry left, the house has felt increasingly empty, carrying an indescribable sadness. As I was cleaning the bedroom, I stopped by the photo on the bedside table. It was the moment Henry and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. His eyes in the photo were as warm and gentle as the first time we met. "Clara, you are the strongest person I know," he often said to me. I wondered what he would think if he were still here, seeing Ethan treating me like someone who needed to be overprotected. At exactly 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. Ethan was always punctual. I opened the door to find him standing next to Sophia, my daughter-in-law. They were an odd couple. Ethan was tall and thin, with a stern expression, while Sophia was petite and had light brown hair, sharp eyes, and a smile that was rarely genuine. "Mom?" Ethan gave me a quick hug and then quickly pulled away, examining me with a questioning gaze. "You look fine. Sophia made you a raspberry cake." Sophia handed me a carefully wrapped box of cakes that looked like they had just come from a high-end bakery. "No sugar," she said, her voice condescending. "We're keeping an eye on you." I smiled in thanks and ushered them into the living room. Sophia put the cups I'd taken from the kitchen counter down on the table. Ethan began pacing around the room, his eyes scanning every corner like an inspector. "Mom, when was the last time you checked the plumbing? There's a stain on the ceiling in the hallway. It looks like a leak." "There's no leak, Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It's just the shadow of the tree outside the window. It's been there for a long time." "Are you sure?" Ethan frowned, looking skeptical. "I could call someone to come check it out. Little problems like this can turn into big problems if not taken care of." I nodded, knowing there was no point in arguing. Ethan always found something to fix in my house. Over the past year, he'd called an electrician, a carpenter, and a landscaper, all of whom had confirmed that there were no major problems. As we sat down at the table, Ethan pulled a thick file from his briefcase. "Mom, I want to talk about your money," Ethan began, speaking in the same tone he would when talking to his own daughter. "I looked at your bank statements for the last 3 months, and I'm concerned about some of your spending." I tensed. I had never given Ethan access to my bank account. "How did you get your statements, Ethan?" I asked, my voice shaking. He hesitated before answering. That doesn't matter. What matters is that you're spending too much on unnecessary things. For example, why did you spend $450 on an online store last month? It was Lily's birthday present, I replied, anger rising. A bike for your niece. Mom, $450 is a lot for a kid, Ethan said, his voice full of judgment. Besides, Lily already has a bike. It's from Mom and Emma, Ethan, I insisted. And no, Lily doesn't have a bike. The one Mom and Sophia gave her for Christmas was a tricycle. She's 5 now. She's a big girl. Ethan glanced at Sophia, and I could tell what they were thinking. Poor Clara, she must be confused. Ethan continued, ignoring me, though. I think Mom needs help with her finances. Ever since Dad died, she's been out of control. What do you mean? I tried to keep my cool, though my voice was a little harsh. Like that trip you booked last year, Ethan said. $600 for a week on a cruise. That was reckless, Mom. I took a deep breath to steady my emotions. That trip was a gift to Emma and her family. We had a great time, and it was money you and Dad earned together. That's what I'm saying, Mom, Ethan said, his voice low, as if he were lecturing a child. You can't just spend money like that. Who knows how long you've got? You need to think about the future. What future, Ethan? I asked, his words like a needle stabbing at my heart. A future where you're stuck at home, not daring to spend a dime without my permission? Sophia cleared her throat. Clara, Mom, we're just worried about you, she said in a sweet, fake voice. Ethan and I talk about how hard it is for you to live alone in this big house. Maybe you should consider somewhere more suitable for your age, Sophia continued, her voice still sweet but full of intent. I looked at them both, suddenly understanding their true intentions. They wanted me to sell this house, my most valuable asset, as Ethan called it, my big investment. You're doing great here, I said, my voice firm, and you have no intention of selling. No one's talking about selling right now, Ethan said quickly, but his eyes betrayed his words. But you should start thinking about it. The real estate market is hot. What about the beach house? Sophia interjected, her gaze sharper than ever. Have you been there at all in the past 2 years? The beach house was Henry and I dreamed of. We'd bought it just 2 years before he died, planning to spend more time there after we retired. But fate didn't allow it. I rarely visited the place after Henry left. The memories were too painful. No, I said, knowing that wasn't entirely true. But that doesn't mean you want to sell it. Lately, I've been thinking more about giving up the house, but not because Ethan thought it was a good idea. Mom, that house is just sitting there, depreciating, Ethan continued, his voice full of conviction. You still have to pay taxes, insurance, and utilities. It's a waste of money. I'll think about it, I said, knowing that was the only way to put the subject to rest. Ethan nodded, satisfied, though I knew he was only superficially satisfied. One more thing, he said, pulling another folder from his briefcase. I talked to the family attorney, Mr. Carter. He thinks you should sign a power of attorney, just in case. You need help making big decisions. I felt the blood drain from my face. Power of attorney for me? I asked, my voice cold. Just a precaution, Mom, Ethan said, forcing a smile that wasn't convincing. You're not getting any younger, and sometimes situations require quick decisions, like selling the house or the beach house. I couldn't help but sound sarcastic. It doesn't have to be that way, does it? Sophia quickly interjected, her tone still sugary. But you have to admit, Clara, it would be much more convenient if Ethan could help you with the paperwork, the banking, and the like. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, trying to understand where things had gone wrong. When had Ethan, the once thoughtful and intelligent son, turned into a controlling man who viewed his mother as a burden or an inheritance? After Henry died, I felt like I had lost a part of myself. We had been together for 40 years, and then he had suddenly died of a heart attack, without me even having a chance to say goodbye. During those first months of grief, Ethan had been my rock. He helped me with the funeral arrangements, the legal paperwork, and the sorting of Henry's belongings. I was so grateful. But then things started to change. Ethan started paying more attention to my finances. At first, it was just innocent questions, like whether I was spending wisely or if I needed help filing my taxes. Then he made suggestions about where to invest, where to cut back, and now he was checking my bank statements and asking for power of attorney. I don't think I need a power of attorney, Ethan, I said firmly. I can handle things myself. It's just a precaution, Mom, Ethan insisted, his voice full of conviction. Nobody says you can't make your own decisions, but what if you get sick? What if something happens? If anything happens, I'll contact you, I said, my voice calm but firm. Or Emma. Ethan's face tensed slightly when I mentioned his daughter. He had never made it a secret that he was displeased with Emma's life choices, as he called them. She had chosen a simple life, working at a botanical garden, rather than pursuing what Ethan considered a worthy business career. Emma? Ethan snorted, his voice dripping with disdain. She's struggling with her own money. How can she help you? Emma's doing great, I said, anger rising in me. She's happy. Would you say that, Ethan? Ethan looked at me as if I'd slapped her across the face. Sophia put her hand on his shoulder, signaling support. We're not here to talk about Emma, she said, her voice cold. We're talking about your safety, Clara. No, we're talking about your money, I said, standing up from the table, my voice firmer. And I think this conversation should end there. Ethan stood up too, his face red with suppressed anger. Mom, you're being unreasonable. I'm just trying to help you. You don't need my help, Ethan, I said, my voice small but firm. And you certainly won't let me see your bank statements. Where did you get them? Ethan hesitated, then muttered something about Mr. Carter, the family lawyer, helping. But I knew Mr. Carter had no right to share my account information without my consent. My resolve grew stronger. I'll call him tomorrow, I announced. No need to bother him, Ethan said quickly, sounding a little panicked. I just want to make sure you're okay. You rarely tell me anything about your life. Because it's my life, Ethan, I said, looking him straight in the eye, and I'm going to live it the way I see fit. The rest of the visit was carried on in a heavy atmosphere. Sophia sipped her tea, pretending to enjoy it, while Ethan flipped through an old magazine, trying to hide his irritation. After about half an hour, they got up to leave, leaving the raspberry tarts untouched and a half-hearted promise to continue this conversation later. When the door closed, I leaned against it, taking a deep breath. My heart was pounding, like I'd just run a long distance. I wasn't used to confronting Ethan. Usually I just nodded to avoid an argument. But today, something was different. Maybe it was the way he'd assumed the right to make decisions for me, or the veiled insults about Emma, or simply the accumulation of years of his controlling nature. I stepped into the living room, my eyes landing on the photo on the bookshelf. It was a picture of Henry and me the day we bought this house in Georgetown. We looked young, hopeful. What are you going to do, Henry? I whispered, running my fingers over his radiant face. But I already knew the answer. Henry had always encouraged me to be strong, to be true to myself. You're more than my wife, Clara, he would say. You're an independent person, with your own dreams and desires. Don't let anyone, not even me, dictate how you live your life. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of relief. Although the conversation with Ethan had been unpleasant, it had awakened a long-forgotten resolve in me. As I glanced through my schedule, I saw a note about an upcoming visit to Emma. My mood immediately brightened. My daughter Emma was completely different from her brother. Ethan was always calculating and materialistic, while Emma was spontaneous and full of enthusiasm for simple things. Although I loved both of my children, the recent moments with Emma had always brought me warmth and genuine joy. I quickly prepared and decided to visit her earlier than planned. Seeing Emma always cheered me up, and today I needed that positive energy. The botanical park where Emma worked was only a 25-minute drive from my house, located on the outskirts of the city. As I parked and walked through the main gate, I was greeted by the sweet scent of grass and earth. I knew I would find Emma in the carnation garden. her favorite corner, which she tended with love and care. Sure enough, there she was, bent over a bush, gently plucking the wilted petals. Wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat, gardening gloves, and a simple cotton dress, Emma looked so peaceful and natural that I was filled with pride. Her light brown hair, pulled back into a ponytail, sparkled in the early morning sunlight. "Mom," she exclaimed when she saw me, her smile beaming, "you're early today." Emma took off her gloves, stood up, and hugged me tightly. She smelled of earth, carnations, and something fresh and alive. "I thought I'd stop by your work," I smiled. "Is that a bother?" "Of course not," Emma replied, her eyes lighting up. "I've just finished here. Wait a moment, let's have some tea." I sat down on a nearby wooden bench and watched Emma work with confidence and passion. Her movements were deft, as if each flower was a work of art. Emma's movements exuded dedication and skill. It was hard to believe that Ethan had once scoffed at her decision to become a botanist. 4 years of college just to plant plants? I remembered him saying when Emma told me about her career choice. At the time, I had been silent, pursed-lipped, but now, watching Emma work, I realized she had chosen the right path. A few minutes later, Emma finished her work, put her tools in her bag, took off her straw hat, and walked over to me. "Come on, Mom. We have fresh raspberry tarts in the cafeteria today," she said, smiling brightly. We walked through the garden to a small cafe near the exit. Emma was a familiar face. The staff greeted her by name, and visitors often stopped to ask her about plants and how to care for flowers. As we sat down at a corner table with cups of herbal tea and some raspberry muffins, Emma looked at me intently. "What's wrong, Mom? You look like you've made a big decision." I'd always admired Emma's ability to read emotions. Where Ethan only saw what he wanted to see, Emma always saw the deeper things. "Ethan came by yesterday," I sighed, "with Sophia." "Oh," Emma frowned. "What did they want this time?" I told her about our conversation, about Ethan trying to get me to sign the power of attorney, and the repeated offers to sell the house in Georgetown and the beach house. Emma's face grew more serious with each word I spoke. "That's too much, Mom," she said when I was done. "He has no right to interfere in your life like that." "I know," I said, and yesterday was the first time I actually told him that. Emma raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Did you really? What did you say?" "That it's your life, and you're going to live it the way you want," I replied, feeling a surge of pride at the memory of my determination. Emma took my hand and squeezed it. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. I know how hard it is to deal with Ethan. He's always so bossy." After finishing her tea, Emma invited me to walk to the greenhouses, where she wanted to show me the new orchid collection she was working on. On the way to the greenhouse, we chatted about the usual: Emma's work, my new art class, and some recent news. "How are James and Lily?" I asked as we stepped into the warm, humid air of the greenhouse. Emma's face lit up at the mention of her husband and daughter. "They're great, Mom. James is working on a big project, installing solar panels on a new industrial estate in the suburbs. He's in charge of all the engineering. You know, he got a bunch of important permits last year. Everyone wants his advice now," she said, her voice full of pride. "And Lily, she won a science fair at school last week. Like you, she loves plants." I smiled, imagining Lily studying a leaf or flower for her competition entry. "I'll have to come visit soon," I said. I haven't seen Lily and James in a while. Emma stopped in front of a display of pale purple orchids, but her eyes weren't on the flowers, but on me. "Actually, Mom," she said, her voice a little excited, "I wanted to invite you over for dinner tonight. We have some news to share." The excitement in her voice intrigued me. "Of course Mom will come. Hopefully it's good news," I replied, smiling. Emma smiled mysteriously. "You'll find out tonight. James will be making his signature pasta bake at 6. After the tour of the greenhouse, Emma showed me around the Japanese Zen garden she'd been tending for the past few months. We strolled around the botanical garden for another hour, taking in the fresh air before I headed home to prepare dinner. At 6 p.m., sharp, I pulled up in front of a modern apartment complex in Portland's riverfront neighborhood. The building was impressive with its gleaming glass towers and meticulously landscaped gardens. Emma and her family had just taken out a mortgage on their apartment here, and I was still getting used to the idea that my daughter, who had chosen a modest career as a gardener, was living in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. Lily greeted me at the gate. My niece rushed out the door when she saw my car, her eyes shining. "Grandma," she exclaimed, hugging me around the waist. "Hurry up, Daddy's making pasta, and I'm helping with the salad." I hugged Lily tightly, amazed at how quickly she had grown. At 5, Lily was the spitting image of Emma as a child. Big, vibrant brown eyes, shiny light brown hair, and seemingly endless energy. We took the elevator to the 9th floor, and Lily pulled me down the hallway to apartment number 903. The door opened, and the aroma of Italian spices and fresh bread filled the room. James emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, smiling warmly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with short brown hair and warm eyes, reminding me of Henry's older brother. "Clara, it's good to see you again, Mom," James said, hugging me gently. "How was the trip? How does the food smell?" "It smells great, James," I smiled. "I hope it tastes as good as it does." James laughed. "Lily, show Grandma your new paintings while I get dinner ready." Lily pulled me into the living room, where a series of children's drawings were neatly arranged on the coffee table. As she excitedly described each one, I looked around the apartment. It was a spacious, bright two-room space with large windows overlooking the city park. The interior was modern but simple, with personal touches, family photos, a few books, souvenirs from trips, and potted plants in every corner. The apartment exuded a warmth and love that Ethan and Sophia's cold, perfectly perfect home lacked. Emma quickly appeared, having changed into a light cotton dress after work. "Lily, go wash your hands before you eat," she said to her daughter, then turned to me, a bright smile on her face. "Thank you for coming. James and I are so excited to share some news with you." The dinner was wonderful. James's pasta bake was so delicious that I couldn't stop praising it. The conversation flowed easily and naturally. Lily talked excitedly about her days at school. James joked about his electrical engineering colleagues, and Emma shared interesting stories about visitors to the botanical garden. I felt warm inside to be with this family. A family so sincere, so loving, so genuine. After dinner, Lily begged her father to play Ludo with her, and we sat in a corner of the living room, leaving Emma and me to clear the table. "So," I said, helping Emma load the dishes into the dishwasher, "what's the news?" Emma smiled brightly, her eyes shining. "Remember when I told you about this beautiful apartment in this building? It's on the 8th floor, right below us, a one-bedroom with a studio kitchen and a small balcony overlooking the park." She paused, then continued in an excited tone. "James and I thought you might want to move there to be closer to Lily." I looked at Emma in surprise. "Move here?" "Yes," Emma said, taking my hand, her voice full of enthusiasm. "Mom, this complex has everything you need. A convenience store, a coffee shop, a gym, even a doctor and a pharmacy on site. The park is right outside the window, and you'll be living just one floor up from us." I was so taken aback by the offer that I didn't know how to respond. "But Emma, this place must be expensive," I said. "You already have a house." "A house too big for you," Emma said softly, "and it needs constant maintenance. Imagine how nice it would be to not have to worry about a leaky roof or broken pipes. Everything here is new, modern, and convenient." James, sensing our conversation was turning serious, left the chessboard with Lily to join in. "Did Emma tell you about our idea?" he asked, smiling warmly. "Clara, this place is absolutely wonderful. You'll love it. It's smaller than yours, but cozy and smartly designed. A real gem." "But how could you afford an apartment here?" I asked, still hesitant. "Even if you sold the house in Georgetown and the beach house together are worth a lot more than this apartment," James explained. "You could buy it mortgage-free, with money to spare." I've been against the idea of selling, especially when Ethan had mentioned it. But now the offer from Emma and James, not just to sell the house, but to start a new chapter with people who truly appreciated me, sounded appealing. Let me show you, Emma said, pulling a glossy book from a drawer. She opened it, showing me pictures of bright apartments with large windows, modern furniture, and views of lush parks. Then she pointed to a floor plan of the apartment complex with its park, pond, bike path, cafe, and other amenities. This is our apartment, she said, pointing to a spot on the floor plan, and this is the eighth floor apartment we were talking about. I flipped through the glossy book, and with each page, the idea of moving to the riverfront apartments appealed to me more and more. A modern apartment, no more maintenance of my old house in Georgetown, living near Emma, James, and Lily, enjoying all the amenities of the complex, and most importantly, being in control of my own property rather than having Ethan dictate to me. I admit the idea is appealing, I said, but I need some time to think about it. It's a big decision. Of course, Mom. Emma hugged me, her voice soft. We just wanted you to know about this opportunity. James and I have been thinking about it ever since we saw the ad for that apartment. Just imagine how wonderful it would be for Lily to be able to visit you after school, have dinner together, go for walks in the park, and not have anyone telling her how to live her life. James chuckled, adding, especially without Ethan telling you what to do. Lily wrinkled her nose at the name of her uncle. Uncle Ethan is always serious, she said innocently, and Aunt Sophia never really smiles. Lily? Emma tried to sound serious, but I could see her holding back a smile. Don't talk about your family like that. But it's true, Lily insisted, her eyes widening as she looked at me. Grandma, if you lived nearby, we could see each other every day. I felt a warm glow spread through me as I looked at my niece's eager face. Maybe this was just what I needed, a fresh start with people who loved me for who I was, not for what I had. I'll think about it, I said, and I meant it. I'll call a realtor tomorrow to see how much the house in Georgetown and the beach house are worth. Emma beamed and James nodded in agreement. The rest of the evening passed in a cozy atmosphere. I played chess with Lily, deliberately letting her win. James showed me pictures of his new solar project, and Emma talked about her idea for a little garden on the balcony of the apartment. When I left, I felt a rare sense of peace, as if I'd been this relaxed in a long time. On the drive home, I kept thinking about Emma's suggestion. The riverfront apartment complex was impressive, with modern infrastructure and amenities. The thought of being close to my daughter and granddaughter, seeing them every day, being a part of their lives filled me with joy. But the decision to sell our home, the house in Georgetown, where I had spent most of my life with Henry, was not easy. Those walls held so many memories, stories of happy times. But perhaps it was time for me to move on, to open a new chapter, to leave the past behind and keep those memories close to my heart. The next morning, I called Daniel Harper, a real estate agent Henry and I had worked with when we bought our beach house. Daniel was known for his diligence and honesty, qualities I value, especially in someone in the financial industry. Clara, it's good to hear from you, Daniel said, his voice warm and sincere. How can I help you today? I'd like to discuss selling my house, I said, surprised by the confidence in my own voice. Can we meet to talk about the details? Sure, Daniel said immediately. I can stop by your place this afternoon if it's convenient. We agreed to meet at 2 p.m., and I spent the morning sorting out the paperwork for the Georgetown house, the vacation home, and the car. The thought of leaving the place where I'd spent so much of my life with Henry filled me with a mixture of nostalgia and excitement. Whenever doubt crept in, I remembered Lily's bright smile as she talked about seeing me every day. That fueled my resolve. At 2 o'clock sharp, Daniel's car pulled up in front of the house. He was always punctual, a trait I admired. I made tea, set out some cookies, and we sat down in the living room. So, Clara, tell me about your plans, Daniel said, pulling out a notebook and pen, ready to take notes. I told him about the offer to move to the riverfront condo complex in Portland, about the eighth floor apartment below Emma's, and about my desire to start a new chapter in my life. Riverfront is an excellent choice, Daniel agreed. It's one of the most modern condos in the city, with top-notch construction and great amenities. What do you think about selling the house and the vacation home? I asked. Can I afford an apartment there? Daniel tapped his pen on his notebook, thoughtful. Let's run the numbers. The real estate market is hot, especially for a house like your beach house, Daniel continued. The proximity to the ocean, the condition, it's a real bargain. The house in Georgetown is in a prime area, too. It's old, but you've kept it well maintained. And the car, how old is it? 5 years, I replied, but it has low mileage. I rarely use it for long trips. Daniel made a quick note, then looked up with a confident smile. Clara, I'm pretty sure the proceeds from selling both of them will be enough to buy the riverfront. Even after taxes and fees, you'll still have a significant amount left over. I felt a weight lifted off my chest. Dreaming about the move was one thing, but knowing it was financially feasible was a relief. Okay, I nodded. Where should we start? I suggest we start with the beach house, Daniel said. It'll sell easier, and it'll give us a better idea of the main house. Can I come see it in a few days? Sure, I said, though I felt a twinge of guilt. It's been a while since I've been there. Henry loved the house, but I'd largely neglected it after he died. It might need some work. Don't worry, Daniel assured me, his voice firm. I know a couple of good contractors who can do it quickly. As for the car, I know a good used car dealer I can recommend. We agreed to see the house tomorrow, and Daniel left, leaving me feeling like I'd just taken the first step on a new journey. The visit to the beach house went more smoothly than I expected. Even though I hadn't been there in over a year, the local maintenance crew Henry and I had hired had taken excellent care of it. The house was clean and well kept, with only a few cosmetic tweaks needed. Daniel took photos, measured the rooms, and wrote up a detailed description. Clara, I think we can put it on the market next week, he said as we drove back to Portland. If things go well, we should find a buyer soon. Properties like this were in high demand. Indeed, within 12 days of listing the house on real estate sites, we had 3 potential buyers. A young couple who ended up making the highest offer fell in love with the house from the start. This is our dream place, the woman Sarah said, her eyes lighting up as she stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean. A place to escape the hustle and bustle of the city. Watching Sarah and her husband, Michael, excitedly discuss the plans for the house, I felt a strange sense of relief. This house deserved to be filled with laughter and love again. I knew Henry would be pleased to know that. The sale was quick and smooth. Sarah and Michael paid more than we had originally offered, clearly in love with the place. My car also sold for a good price. As Daniel had predicted, its low mileage and near new condition made all the difference. Selling the Georgetown house was a little trickier. Though it was in an upscale, spacious neighborhood, its age and classic style limited the pool of potential buyers. Daniel suggested renovating the interior before listing it. Buyers today like bright open spaces, he explained as we discussed plans. Just changing the LED lighting, painting the walls a neutral color, adding some modern wallpaper, and the house would look completely different. I agreed, although the thought of changing a place that had been the same for so many years made me a little nervous. But Daniel was right. After 3 weeks of renovations, the house was fresh and modern, while still retaining its distinct charm. Throughout this process, I didn't tell Ethan what I was planning. Part of me wanted to call and explain, but the other part, still hurt by his attempts to control my life, kept it a secret until the last minute. After all, I didn't need to explain my decisions to him. Emma, on the other hand, was my constant companion. She helped me sort through my belongings, decide what to bring to the new apartment, and what to donate or sell. Strangely enough, there was a surprising sense of freedom in sorting through decades of accumulated stuff, keeping only the things that truly meant something to me. Are you sure you want to get rid of this? Emma would ask whenever I considered discarding something she thought had sentimental value. I keep memories in my heart, honey, I'd say, and stuff is stuff. There were exceptions, of course, photographs, letters from Henry, and a few pieces of furniture that were especially suited to the new apartment. But much of what once filled my and Henry's house, I was willing to leave behind. Finally, almost 2 months after our first conversation, a couple with two young children made an offer. They wanted a spacious home in a good area, and although their offer was a little lower than expected, we negotiated and reached a reasonable agreement. Congratulations, Clara, Daniel said as he signed the final paperwork. You sold both properties, and I must say, for a very good price. I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, excitement, a little regret, but most of all, freedom. For the first time in years, I was free from the responsibilities of homeownership. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. The next day, Daniel and I went to the sales office of the Riverfront Condominiums in Portland to discuss the purchase of the condo Emma had suggested. Emma was there too, taking a day off from the botanical garden to accompany me. Mrs. Clara, Mr. Harper, it's a pleasure to meet you. The sales manager, an elegant woman named Laura, greeted us in a spacious office with large windows overlooking the complex. I hear you're interested in 802? That's right, Emma confirmed, beaming. My mother is considering moving to Riverfront, and this unit is perfect. It's just one floor below ours. Laura smiled professionally. It's a great choice. This apartment is one of the gems of the complex. Compact but cleverly designed, with a great view of the park. Would you like to see it now? We walked through the well-kept grounds of Riverfront to the building where the apartment was located. Along the way, Laura pointed out the amenities: an indoor pool, a state-of-the-art gym, 24-hour security, and underground parking. Riverfront is designed to provide maximum convenience and safety for residents, she explained. Everything you need is on site, but the city center is just a few minutes away. We took the elevator to the 8th floor, and Laura opened the door to apartment 802. My breath caught as I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the natural light pouring in through the large windows. Though smaller than my old house in Georgetown, the apartment was thoughtfully designed, feeling spacious and airy. The main space is the studio kitchen. Laura leads us into the central area, where there is a modern, fully equipped kitchen, a multi-purpose bar that doubles as a dining table and a work area. The living room is arranged to maximize the view. Indeed, the view of the park below is picturesque: lush trees, winding paths, and a small, sparkling lake. Like an oasis in the middle of the city, I think. This is the bedroom, Laura continues, opening the door to a room next door. It's not very large, but it's extremely cozy. The built-in wardrobe is compact, optimizing space, and the bedroom window faces the park, maintaining the same lush green view as the living room. Although small, the bedroom is elegantly furnished, with enough space for a double bed, a small wardrobe, and a reading nook by the window. I imagine waking up every morning, watching the sunrise spread across the park, filled with peace. This is the bathroom, Laura continued, leading me to the next room. The bathroom has a modern shower, sink, toilet, and space for a washing machine. Bright white tiles make the space look larger, combined with new plumbing, a large mirror, and built-in storage shelves. Says every detail is carefully considered. And this is the highlight of the apartment, Laura said, opening the sliding glass doors from the living room. We stepped out onto a small but cozy balcony with enough room for a table and chairs and a few potted plants. I walked to the railing and took a deep breath of fresh air. The park seemed closer from here. The noise of the city seemed to fade away. It would be the perfect place to sip morning coffee or afternoon tea. So, what do you think? Emma came over to me, her eyes shining with excitement. Do you like it? Perfect, I said, and it was true. The apartment was everything I was looking for: compact but not cramped, modern but cozy, with a soothing view. We returned to the sales office to discuss the financial details. Daniel, as usual, was very helpful, explaining every clause in the contract to make sure I got the best deal. Since you're paying all in cash without a loan, we can give you a little discount, Laura said, flipping through the paperwork. Also, if you want the furniture package, we'll give you a discount. I glanced at Daniel, and he nodded, confirming that it was a reasonable offer. When can I move in? I asked, feeling my excitement growing. The apartment is ready, Laura replied. Just finish the paperwork, about a week, and you can move in. As I left the sales office, I felt like I had just made the biggest move of my life, second only to marrying Henry. It was both nerve-wracking and exhilarating. You won't regret it, Emma said, hugging me tightly. We'll be close. Lily can come over after school. We'll have dinner together, go for a walk in the park. I know, honey, I hugged her back, smiling, and I'm not hesitating anymore. As I drove back to my soon-to-be lost Georgetown home, I thought about my journey. Just a few months ago, I had been overwhelmed by Ethan's attempts to control me, feeling old and useless. Now, I had sold my Georgetown home, my beach house, and my car, and bought a new apartment, ready to start a new chapter in my life. The money from the sale of my house had far exceeded my expectations. After buying the riverfront apartment and spending some money on a smaller car, I still had a significant amount left over. I decided to use the money to pay off most of Emma and James's mortgage. They deserved this support, not only for their kindness and concern, but also for inspiring me to take this bold step. I didn't tell Ethan about my plans, not out of revenge or punishment, but because this was my decision, my life, and I didn't feel the need to explain it to him. That evening, sitting in the nearly empty living room, most of the furniture had been sold or given away, I felt a strange sense of relief. Getting rid of these things felt like I was unburdening myself of the past, of old expectations and habits. In the silence of my soon-to-be departed home, I was finally honest with myself. I was ready for a change, ready to leave the past behind and step into a future of my own making. Early in the morning, as I finished breakfast, the phone rang. I had been focused on preparing for the move for the past few weeks. Most of my belongings were carefully packed, some furniture sold, the rest clearly labeled. Move to the new apartment on the riverfront, send to Emma's, donate to the thrift store, or throw it away. Seeing Ethan's name on the phone screen made me feel a little uneasy. We hadn't spoken since he'd tried to get me to sign the power of attorney. Ethan had called a few times, but I hadn't picked up, not ready for another argument about my finances. Good morning, Ethan, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Mom? Ethan's voice was unusually excited. Finally got in touch with you. I have good news. What news? I asked, feeling my body tense. I sold the beach house and your car, Ethan announced, his tone smug, as if he were leaning back in his chair, smiling contentedly. Both at a good price. Given the current market, now is the perfect time to sell. I was silent, trying to process what I had just heard. Ethan had sold my assets, assets I no longer owned, since I had sold them 2 months ago. Are you still there? Ethan asked, when the silence stretched. Yes, I am here, Ethan, I said slowly, and I am trying to understand how you can sell something that doesn't belong to you. What? His voice was confused. What are you talking about? We've talked about this before. Remember, you said the vacation home was losing value, and the car was too big for an older woman to live alone. We did talk about it, I said, a strange sense of calm rising in me. But you didn't give me permission to sell them. And more importantly, you sold the vacation home and the car yourself 2 months ago. There was a long silence on the phone. I could almost see Ethan trying to process the information, his mind racing. What? He finally said, his voice full of confusion. You're kidding, right? You couldn't. How could you do that on your own? You worked with Daniel Harper? I worked with Daniel, I explained, my voice calm. You remember him? The guy who helped your mom and dad buy that beach house. A very trustworthy realtor. But, but, Ethan stammered, seemingly at a loss for words. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ask me before you sold your property? Why did you have to ask me? I replied, my voice still calmer than I expected. It's your property. Another silence. Mom, Ethan said finally, his tone taking on a tone of condescension that I couldn't stand. I know you're upset about Dad, but I was only acting in your best interests. Now, seriously, did you really sell the house and the car? Or was it, you're imagining things? Anger welled up in me, but I held it in. If you don't believe me, Ethan, Call the estate office or the motor vehicle office. They'll confirm that the vacation home and the car are no longer in your name. Another silence, and this time I heard Ethan gasp through the phone. Mom, he said, his voice strained. If this is true, we've got a problem. I took the money from the buyer, all of it. Then you have a problem, I said, my voice cold, because you sold something that didn't belong to you. I have to come to your house, Ethan said urgently. We need to talk in person. I'll be there in an hour with Sophia. He hung up before I could answer. I slowly put the phone down on the table, feeling a mixture of worry, anger, and a strange sense of satisfaction. For the first time in years, Ethan was facing the consequences of his controlling ways. I called Emma, briefly describing our conversation. Oh my gosh, Mom, Emma laughed into the phone. He dug himself a hole, didn't he? I'm afraid so, I said, feeling a twinge of guilt at finding the situation somewhat humorous. He's on his way here with Sophia in about an hour. Should I come over? Emma asked, her voice full of concern. To cheer her up? I thought for a moment, then shook my head even though she couldn't see. No, honey, I think I should handle this myself. But thanks for asking. Exactly an hour later, as I finished packing the last of my books, the doorbell rang. Ethan stood at the door, pale and tense, Sophia behind him, her expression a mixture of irritation and concern. Come in, I said, stepping aside to let them in. They entered the living room, paused, and looked around in amazement at the empty space filled with cardboard boxes. What's going on? Ethan asked, his voice higher than usual. I'm moving, I said curtly. Sit down if you can find a place. Most of my stuff's been sold. They sat down on the old sofa, the one I'd left behind because it didn't fit the style of my new riverfront apartment. I sat across from them, arms crossed, waiting to see what they would say. Mom, Ethan began, trying to sound reasonable. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I just wanted to help you. The beach house needed maintenance. The car was too big. I found a buyer for it at a good price. It's all for your benefit. Your benefit? I repeated, unable to hide the doubt in my voice. Ethan, I sold your property without your consent or even your knowledge. How could that be for your benefit? Mom, you're not getting any younger, Ethan said, wincing slightly. Making big financial decisions isn't easy for you. I just wanted to save you stress. Ethan? I stepped closer, looking him straight in the eye. I'm 65. I don't have dementia or any other issues that would affect my ability to make decisions. I'm perfectly capable of managing my finances. I sold my vacation home, my car, my house in Georgetown, and bought a new apartment without your intervention. You sold the house? Sophia spoke for the first time, her eyes widening in shock. Yes, I nodded. 3 weeks ago. The new owners move in 2 weeks. Where are you moving to? Ethan asked, his voice shaking with anger. Riverfront, I replied, unable to suppress a small smile when I saw his eyes widen in shock. A nice 8th-floor condo overlooking the park, I continued, right below Emma and James's, Riverfront, Portland. Sophia looked shocked. But it's one of the most expensive condos in the city. Yes, I nodded. But the sale of the Georgetown house, the beach house, and the car brought in enough money to buy the condo without a mortgage, with some left over for spending. Ethan looked at me as if he were seeing his mother for the first time. His face went from surprise to disbelief to panic. Mom, his voice shook. Did you know I got the money from the buyers of the house and the car? All of it. They're going to ask for the paperwork in a few days. Yes, that's a problem. I nodded, my voice calm. A problem I created by selling things that don't belong to me. You have to help me, Ethan almost shouted. It's your fault. Your fault? I raised my eyebrows. How is it your fault that you sold your own property? You should have told me, Ethan shouted, his voice filled with anger. You know I'm trying to handle everything. No, I didn't, I replied, keeping my cool. You never said anything in our conversations about what you were planning to sell. I just asked if you were thinking about selling, and you said you'd think about it. That's all. Sophia turned to Ethan, her voice as cold as ice. You sold the property without proper documentation. I had a power of attorney, Ethan protested, his voice shaking. From Mr. Carter, the family attorney. You mean a forged power of attorney? I pressed. Because I never signed any power of attorney for you, Ethan. Never. Ethan's face paled. Mr. Carter said that since Mom was a widow and I was the eldest son, I had the right to do so. You forged the papers. Sophia shot up from her chair, her eyes blazing with rage. Do you know that's a serious crime? Fraud, selling someone else's property? I didn't forge it. Ethan stood up too, his face white. Carter said it was legal. Then Mr. Carter should brush up on his legal knowledge, I said, because Mom is pretty sure the power of attorney needs her signature. Ethan paced the room, pulling at his hair. What am I going to do now? The money, I've spent most of it. Gone? Sophia was shocked, her voice almost breaking. Spend it on what? Sophia demanded, her eyes piercing. On some investments, Ethan muttered, his voice weak, and a new car, and that trip I was going to give you for our anniversary. So you used money that wasn't yours to buy me a present? Sophia looked as if she was about to lunge at Ethan, and now we're both complicit in a fraud. I didn't know, Ethan shouted. How was I supposed to know that Mom would sell everything behind my back? Behind your back? I couldn't believe my ears. Ethan, it's Mom's money. She doesn't have to tell you what she does with it. You're my mom. Ethan turned to me, his face red with anger. You should have asked me, especially for such a big decision. No, you didn't, I said, keeping my voice calm, which seemed to irritate him even more. You're a grown woman, fully capable of making your own decisions. And where did that leave you? Ethan clasped his hands together, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You sold the family home, bought an apartment in this posh complex that doesn't suit you at all. You'll be living next door to Emma, who's not even what, Ethan? I interrupted, my voice hardening. Tell me, what do you think of your sister? Ethan paused, seeming to realize he'd gone too far. I mean, he lowered his voice, you're used to a different lifestyle. The big house, the garden. You'd be claustrophobic in a small apartment like that. That's your concern, not mine, I said. And if you must know, I'm excited to move to Riverfront. No more leaky roofs or broken pipes. Everything here is new, modern, and convenient, I continued, my voice firm. And yes, Mom will live near Emma, James, and Lily, who, unlike some, respect Mom's autonomy. Ethan looked as if he were about to say something, but Sophia spoke first. Back to the point, she said, turning to her husband, her voice cold. You took money from the sale of property that doesn't belong to you. You need to pay it back immediately. I told you I spent most of it, Ethan shouted, his voice strained. I don't have that money left. Then you'll have to borrow, Sophia interrupted, uncompromising. Otherwise, you'll face fraud charges. From where? Ethan looked cornered, his voice almost desperate. Which bank will lend us money when we're so deep in debt and mortgages? That's not my problem. Sophia crossed her arms, her eyes sharp. You brought this on yourself. You have to fix it. Mom, Ethan turned to me, his voice suddenly pleading. You have to help me. You don't want your son to go to jail, do you? I looked at Ethan, a mixture of pity and disappointment. This grown man, my son, who had always been so sure he knew everything, now looked like a frightened child. Ethan, I said, my voice soft but firm, I can't help you. The money from the sale of the house has been distributed, some to buy the riverfront apartment, some to pay off Emma and James's mortgage, some to buy a new, more suitable car. The rest I'm keeping for the future. You gave the money to Emma? Ethan looked as if he'd been hit, his voice filled with resentment. My sister, the gardener who lives in luxury in this apartment complex? Your sister, I corrected, who has a loving husband, a meaningful job, a lovely daughter, and lives by her own values, not by the expectations of others. Mom helped them pay off their debts because she wanted to. That's not fair, Ethan almost shouted. Emma was always Mom's favorite. It's not about favoritism, Ethan, I sighed. It's about respect. Emma respected Mom's autonomy, made suggestions, but let Mom make her own decisions. She didn't try to control her or convince her she couldn't take care of herself. I just wanted to help. Ethan's voice was almost pathetic. No, I shook my head. I wanted to control. Those are two different things. Sophia, who had been watching silently, suddenly turned to Ethan. I can't believe you got us into this, she said, her voice icy. You acted behind your mother's back, possibly breaking the law, and now we risk losing everything because of your stupidity. Don't call me stupid, Ethan turned, his voice growling, facing Sophia. I'm trying to keep us financially stable, Ethan shouted, his voice defensive. I'm thinking about our future. Stability by fooling your mother? Sophia sneered, her voice sharp. That was the perfect plan, Ethan. Brilliant. You've never been on my side, Ethan shouted back, his voice rising. Always criticizing, always finding fault with me. Mistakes? Sophia shot back, her voice no less harsh. First that stupid investment last year, and now this. Do you know we could lose our house if we have to pay that money back? I sat watching their argument, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. It was upsetting to watch two grown men scream at each other, completely ignoring my presence. But at the same time, there was a certain fairness to the scene. Ethan, who always wanted to be in control, was now completely out of control. I think you two should continue this argument at home, I said, rising from my chair. I have a lot of work to do to prepare for the move. They both turned to look at me, as if realizing I was still there. Ethan looked confused, Sophia angry. Yeah, we should go, Sophia said, regaining her composure first. Sorry about the scene, Clara. We really have to go. She headed straight for the door, not waiting for Ethan. Ethan lingered for a moment, looking at me with a mixture of anger, resentment, and maybe a little fear. Mom, he began, but I shook my head. Not now, Ethan, I said. You need to deal with the problem you created and think about your actions. He stood there for a few more seconds, as if he wanted to say something, but then he just nodded and followed Sophia. The door closed, leaving the house in a comfortable silence. I sat down and took a deep breath. Strangely, I didn't feel any joy or satisfaction at seeing Ethan in this state, only exhaustion and a tinge of sadness. He was still my son after all, and it hurt me to see his actions push him into this crisis. But at the same time, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if the last strings that bound me to my past, a life where I let others make my decisions for me, had been cut. I was free not just from the extra stuff and the too big house in Georgetown, but also from expectations and control. 2 weeks later, I was preparing to move into a new apartment in Portland's riverfront complex. Though my encounter with Ethan and Sophia still haunted me, I was filled with excitement for a new beginning. Moving day arrived in the surprisingly warm early fall air. The movers loaded the last of their boxes onto the truck, and I made a tour of the Georgetown house where I had lived for nearly 4 decades. Footsteps echoed through the empty rooms, evoking a sense of both nostalgia and release. Goodbye, I whispered, standing outside the bedroom door where Henry and I had shared so many long nights. Thank you for everything. I didn't cry. The tears had come long ago, in the early months after Henry died, when every corner of the house reminded me of him. Now I was ready to move on, to open a new chapter. When I closed the front door, Emma was waiting in her car, ready to take me to my new home. Are you okay, Mom? She asked, hugging me tightly. More than okay, I smiled. Let's go. The riverfront greeted us with a buzz of activity. People strolled along the park's paths, chatted at sidewalk cafes, or exercised outdoors. The place was alive, and I felt a surge of energy just by arriving. The eighth-floor apartment was exactly as I remembered it from the first time I'd arrived. Bright, spacious, and impeccably appointed. But now, with my furniture and personal items moved in, it felt like mine. Large windows flooded the space with natural light, and the balcony opened up to a stunning view of the park below. How does it feel, Mom? Emma stood beside me, watching my reaction, her eyes shining with excitement. Perfect, I said, and it was true. The next few days were a whirlwind of organizing the new home. I unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, and hung pictures. Emma, James, and even little Lily all pitched in, making it a fun family activity. Look, Grandma, Lily exclaimed, pulling an old photograph from the box. That's his picture. It'll look great hanging in that corner. That's a great idea, honey, I said, kissing her forehead, my heart warming at her concern. By the end of the week, the riverfront apartment was as neat as if I had lived there all along. It felt both strange and comforting to start a new life, but still retain ties to the past through carefully curated photos and items. Living at Riverfront far exceeded my expectations. The thoughtfully designed complex included amenities like a 24/7 front desk, a state of the art gym, and an indoor pool. In just the first month, I joined a senior yoga class, a book club, and regular movie screenings at the community center. You look so happy, Emma remarked one evening as we sat on the balcony, sipping tea and watching the sunset. She really is, I admitted, feeling completely happy for the first time in years. Every morning I woke up filled with anticipation. What would the day bring? Who would I meet? What new things would I discover? This energy and curiosity reminded me of my younger days, before I married Henry, when the world seemed full of possibilities. I quickly became acquainted with a few of my neighbors, especially Margaret, a 68-year-old retired art teacher who lived in the apartment next door. We often practiced yoga together, then stopped by a nearby cafe to chat about books, movies, and everyday life. Clara, Margaret once said, at our age, it's a brave thing to start something new. Most people cling to what's familiar, even if it no longer makes them happy. Margaret's words made me think of Ethan. We had barely spoken since that tense confrontation. When he learned I had moved, he had called a few times, but the conversations had been short and tense. Emma told me that Ethan was in serious financial trouble, having to repay defrauded buyers in a property sale. She said he had taken out a second mortgage on his house, and his relationship with Sophia had deteriorated because of the constant arguing. Emma said Sophia had been constantly criticizing Ethan, calling him irresponsible, and their arguments had escalated. It wasn't nice, Emma said, her voice full of regret. I felt regret too, but not guilt. Ethan had gotten himself into this situation because of his controlling ways and rash decisions. While it pained me to see my son struggling, I knew I couldn't save him from the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, my life at Riverfront was starting to take on a new, meaningful rhythm. I started volunteering at the community library twice a week, helping with the children's reading program. It reminded me of the days when Emma and Ethan were little, when I would read them bedtime stories. I also enrolled in an acrylic painting class, a hobby I'd always wanted to pursue but never had time for. The greatest joy is being with Lily. Living close to Emma, I often pick her up after school. We bake cookies, play dominoes, or just sit on the balcony and watch the birds and squirrels run around in the park. Grandma, I love that you're so close now, Lily said to me one afternoon as we were making Thanksgiving cards. I used to see you only on weekends, but now I see you every day. Her innocent words warmed my heart. I am so grateful to be a part of my niece's daily life, to watch her grow up, to share her small joys and her childish worries. About 3 months after moving to Riverfront, I was returning from my morning yoga class when Ryan, the receptionist, called me over in the lobby. Clara, you have a visitor, he said, his voice a little awkward. Your son? He's been waiting for about 20 minutes, but I didn't want to disturb you during your class. I was surprised. Ethan had never been to the riverfront, let alone dropped in unannounced. Thanks, Ryan. Where is he? In the reception area near the lobby. Ryan pointed to the corner with the large glass doors. I told you he couldn't come up to the apartment without your permission, according to security. I nodded, appreciating the strict security at Riverfront. No one was allowed on the apartment without permission. One of my favorite things about the place. Ethan was sitting in the living area sipping coffee, his eyes glued to his phone, looking worried. He looked haggard, pale, gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. When he saw me, Ethan stood up quickly, spilling his coffee on the table. Mom, you're finally here, he said, relief mixed with tension. I thought you were avoiding me. You're doing yoga, I explained, sitting at a table away from the others. I should have called before I came. Ethan sat across from me, his eyes scanning the modern interior of the reception area. This place is beautiful, he said after a moment. Impressive. I like it here. I nodded. What brings you here, Ethan? He hesitated, then blurted out, Mom, I need your help. I waited for him to continue, though I could already guess what he was going to say. Things are tough, Ethan said, avoiding my eyes. The loan I took out to pay off the mortgage, the interest rate was higher than I thought. And Sophia, she left. She filed for divorce. I felt a pang of pity. Despite their differences, Ethan was still my son, and it pained me to see him suffer. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my voice sincere. Yes, Ethan smiled wryly, his voice bitter. She said she couldn't live with someone who was both financially incompetent and too arrogant to admit his mistakes. He was silent for a moment, trying to regain his composure. Mom, I know you have money from the sale of the house. I need to borrow some money to pay off the debt. I will pay back the principal and interest as soon as things settle down. I looked at Ethan, silently observing my son for a long moment. Sitting in front of me was the man who thought he knew best how I should live, how to manage my finances, and how to make decisions. Ethan had tried to control my life under the guise of caring, but now he was in a situation he couldn't control. Ethan, I said, my voice soft but firm, I can't give you that money. Why not? Ethan frowned, his voice full of resentment. I helped Emma pay off the mortgage. Why can't I? It's not a matter of can or can't, I explained. The point is that I don't need financial help right now. What I need is to learn to live within my means, take responsibility for bad decisions, and most importantly, stop trying to control things that aren't mine. But you could lose your house. Ethan's voice shook with despair. Maybe, I nodded, and that would be a difficult challenge. But Ethan, money doesn't solve your problems. Your problems run deeper than that, and only you can fix them. Ethan looked at me, his face showing shock, disbelief, and a hint of recognition. I am your son, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Shouldn't you be helping me? You are helping me, I replied, by not letting me escape the consequences of my actions. Sometimes the best help is letting someone find their own way through a problem of their own making. Ethan sat still, his eyes fixed on his nearly empty coffee cup. Then he stood and pulled on his jacket. I understand, he said dryly. I'm sorry you feel so intrusive, Ethan. I stood up after him. You'll always be my son, and I'll always love you. But I can't support your habit of wanting to control everything, including me. When you're ready to build a relationship based on respect, I'll be happy to see you again. Ethan nodded, not looking at me, and walked out the door. He paused for a moment, as if he wanted to say something, but then left quietly. I returned to my apartment feeling a mixture of sadness and peace. Talking to Ethan was difficult, but necessary. Perhaps in the long run, this was the best thing I could do for him. Give him a chance to grow by facing the consequences of his own mistakes. That evening, Emma, James, Lily, and I had dinner together, as we did almost every night. After dinner, when Lily went back to her room to do her homework, I told Emma and James about Ethan's surprise visit. He's in big trouble, Emma sighed, her voice full of regret. But you did the right thing. Ethan needs to learn to take responsibility for his actions. You're right, I nodded. But that doesn't make my decision any easier. James, who had been listening quietly, suddenly stood up and left the room. He returned with a bottle of red wine and 3 glasses. I think we all need some, he said, smiling softly as he poured the wine. We sat in the cozy atmosphere, sipping our wine and watching the lights of Portland twinkle through the windows. Moments like these made me realize how lucky I was to have Emma and James, people who supported me and loved me unconditionally. By the way, James said suddenly, as if remembering something, I've been meaning to tell you for a while, Clara. Remember when we offered you the riverfront apartment? Of course, I nodded, smiling. It was the best offer you've had in years. James looked a little embarrassed. Actually, I asked a colleague, Mark, to hold it for you. He works in the riverfront sales office. Really? I said, looking at James. Yes, he nodded, then glanced at Emma as if asking for permission to continue. Emma smiled, nodding encouragingly. When we found out the 8th floor apartment was available, Emma and I immediately thought of you. And to be honest, if you hadn't made enough money from the sale, we would have taken out another mortgage to buy it for you. James paused, looking at me. We just wanted you near us. I felt a lump in my throat, tears welling up in my eyes. Emma and James, my daughter and son-in-law, were willing to take on the extra loan just so I could live near them. Not because they thought I couldn't take care of myself, but simply out of love and the desire to be together. I don't know what to say, I muttered, wiping away tears. This is the most wonderful thing anyone has ever done for me. We love you, Mom, Emma said, squeezing my hand, her eyes sparkling. We want you to be a part of our everyday lives, not just a weekend visitor. I hugged them both, overwhelmed with gratitude and love. In that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. Not just the decision to move to Riverfront, but also the way I would live and raise my two children, who grew up on completely different paths. Ethan, with all his flaws, chose the path of control, the pursuit of material success and power. But Emma chose a different path, a path of honesty, care, and cherished relationships. Now, sitting in their warm living room, surrounded by love, I am so grateful for the choice I made to be with people who truly appreciate me. Outside the window, the Portland sky is dark, but inside, I am still bright, the light of a new life, a future of my own making.